3. Hello and welcome to the Wrights of Spring Playwright interview series with the Grappler. My name is Jordan Scott Hardesty. I am one of the co-editors-in-chief of the Grappler. The Grappler is a community journal based at the Theater School of DePaul University. And right now we are interviewing a bunch of playwrights, BFA 3 and BFA 4 playwrights for the Wrights of Spring New Play Festival at DePaul. About their process and about the projects that they're currently working on. So today we are here with Connor Bradshaw. Connor, can you tell us where you're calling in from?
I am calling in from my grandparents' farm in rural Indiana. It's a trip.
Amazing, amazing. This is really a wild time to be writing and a wild time to be artists right now. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about Boxed In. Of course, I want to let the audience know that I have a little bit of experience with Boxed In. Last year around this time, I served for a week as a dramaturg on a workshop of this play, but it's morphed into something much larger than it was then. So Connor, can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah. So after the production was canceled, probably mid to late March, we were sort of, as a team, spinning our wheels a little bit and trying to figure out, okay, what's the next logical step? Does it even happen? And we'd thrown around a lot of ideas before the quarantine got sort of as enforced as it was. We thought we would just go site specific and maybe bring in 5 to 7 people. And then when that group was sort of changed and it was made to a stay-at-home order, we were like, okay, what's a form that is both readily accessible and enables us to lean into the various visual elements that we had already based off in the play. So we decided on a sort of multimedia podcast that is housed on a website. And the way the interface on the website is working right now is you sort of, in the play, what had happened is as you go through and keep experiencing it, you get deeper and deeper, and the play is sort of chronicled by the various items that the 2 characters in the play, John and Louise, are going through, and they're sort of going through their dead son's belongings. And we tried our best to sort of emulate that on the site by having the interface, once again, sort of you click through and each page of the site is a sort of different page filled with different items that would be the same items we had in the play. So that was one thing we really wanted to keep the same. And actually, I did a ton of rewriting. I think there might be a monologue from the original play in the website now. We really scrapped, or not scrapped, we retooled as much as we could and adapted as much as we could, because we realized in the 2 weeks we had in the room as a sort of physical on your feet workshop that so much of the play's meaning is conveyed through image and conveyed through characters looking at each other and silences, and that just doesn't always translate really well on strictly like a listening platform. So I completely rewrote it, cut it down, rewrote it again. Now I think we have about 50 to 55 minutes of content, not including all the various images you can click onto, but it's super, super exciting. A lot of people did some incredible work on it. We got a website designer, Agata Pacha was our sound designer, and then we were able to get Saskia Bacher, the assistant director. She's helped with so many different sort of creative and graphic design elements of the show. So it's really been it's been a sort of blessing in disguise seeing how these different talents are coalescing.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds really interesting. You said that you had to rewrite most, if not all, of this production. So I'm curious about whether or not you had tools in your playwriting tool belt equipped to write a play like this, or was this a completely new experience writing a play, only thinking about the audio rather than, of course, all of the other aspects of theater?
Yeah. I mean, I would say by virtue of having conservatory training for 4 years in playwriting, there is overlap with other sort of mediums, but that this was, for the most part, a pretty new experience. I've written, fiction and short stories in the past, but this was definitely a bit of a different beast. A lot of the things about the characters remain the same, but how they interact with one another is completely different. One of my characters, John, he in the play actually does not speak all that often, because we framed him as a very sort of stoic type, somebody who almost actively sponges up, or soaks up rather, a lot of the sort of conflict in the play and tries his best to sort of just deal with it himself. And we realized that doesn't translate. That the silence does not translate to an auditory platform. So we had to sort of retool and re-gear and figure out, okay, how can I make a character that I've built for over a year and a half now, who speaks a certain way, say things that he would never say in a normal circumstance, and how can we make that honest? And we sort of landed on internal monologues, because obviously he thinks and feels things that he just doesn't always emote. But that was definitely a bit of a hurdle to jump through, because so much of the playwriting curriculum is based on what things look like on the stage. So really it was just relying on the sort of basics of storytelling, which was character, and just arc in general, and really doing the best you can to intuit from there. I know we listen to a lot of podcasts. A lot of people listen to Alice Isn't Dead. Welcome to Night Vale is always really, really helpful. Sort of leaning into other sort of true crime podcasts in terms of different elements they integrate, whether that be technically or on a storytelling level, and seeing exactly how much we could borrow to adapt the play to its truest version of itself while it's in a different platform.
Yeah, I think that that's all very interesting. I'm especially drawn to this idea of using a particular format. So looking at other members of your cohort and other plays that are being set up either for Rites of Spring or for something else at the theater school, it seems that a lot of people are going the radio play, audio route. Some are doing some podcasts here and there, but yours, as far as I know, is one of the only ones that is truly interactive. And I'm wondering what conversations were built around making this an interactive experience, and how did you land on this?
Yeah. So something we talked about a lot in the room and staging it was how we can, and this was actually, I know I don't know if you'll include this, Jordan, but I know we had conversations about measure for measure and staging it, and if there's a way to sort of implicate the audience, or at bare minimum sort of make them feel culpable to an extent. We were talking a lot about how in the room we wanted to see if there was a way to stage the production that that sort of forces the audience to be active participants in the drama. And we realized, okay, how can we sort of take this idea and blow it up a little bit more, because now we can actually make something interactive, where before the play was, it was very almost presentational. It wasn't something that was, interactive. So we had jogged around ideas of actually making it a choose your own adventure piece, where you assume the role of either John and Luis, and you have to go through items in the box and you have to figure out what they all mean. And then we scrapped that, one, because of time, and two, because we have a sort of, we have an arc we want to we want to accomplish and pull off. So we decided to hit on this idea of interactivity while also preserving the arc. We were like, okay, well, if we build out a site and we have all these items on a landing page, the audience member, I guess, the person clicking onto the site, they are not instructed to click on any item in particular. They can click on whatever item they can choose. They can leave and go to a different box whenever they choose. So in that sense, there's sort of interaction and agency, because they can choose. I mean, they could theoretically choose to skip a whole box, which can be as many as 15 years of John and Louise's life, if they so choose, or they could listen to one part, or they could literally go through the 5 boxes and listen to one item from each box and truncate the entire viewing into like 10 minutes. And we like that, and we wanted to think, okay, is how then can we make every story in each box feel important enough that viewed on its own and in conjunction with any of the other stories, you could still achieve that arc. So that was a really interesting thing to also sort of play into. And I think we did it. We'll see, but I think we got pretty close, which is really awesome in a month and a half, give or take, to get that much progress and that much work done.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see it. The way that you're framing it right now is really intriguing, and obviously something I haven't seen so far in this pandemic, as everyone is rushing towards creating something. So definitely on this idea of creating something like a DIY sort of feel after the pandemic hit. I'm wondering how you, Connor Bradshaw, how you feel about the role of art in this time, because I know that there are a million takes about should we be creating a bunch of art or should we use this time for rest. So I'm curious about if you have any thoughts about the meaning of art during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't. I think I've softened on the stance. I remember there was an article that came out, and I'm totally blanking on who it was by, but it was towards the beginning of the stay-at-home orders, and it was basically decrying the decisions to have Zoom rehearsals and Zoom productions, and that it's not for the public, it's for us, and that theater has become an inherently selfish art form, and that's how it's being communicated. And the good thing about theater is live communion, and if you can't have live interactive communion with other people in the same space, it's not theater anymore. And I've softened on completely agreeing with it. I think art might take a different. I think art might hold a different role right now than it might have before. I think when things were really good, we could look to art to sort of provide a means of critique, provide a sort of critique, yes, but also a sort of a way of investigating our own lives in a way that might not always be all that positive. When in times of crisis like now, I think art can be looked at as a means of escape. However, that isn't to say that art that challenges or critiques or even implicates doesn't have a place. I just think it's tough to make art. It's tough to take in art right now. Nobody should feel compelled to watch. Nobody should feel compelled to create. We're all just trying to survive and do the best we can. And I'm not in the camp that's like, now is a time to write because you're just sitting at home anyways. That's to me anyway, that seems like a pretty callous take on the situation at hand. And that ultimately we just need to do what makes us happy. And if what makes us happy is logging on to Zoom every week and reading a play with some people, if what makes us happy is not looking at a play for another year, if what makes us happy is starting a podcast, great. Like, I think we just need to be really attuned to what we want to do, and that we shouldn't feel any obligation to do anything. Except, like, survive and not hurt people. But artistically, we shouldn't feel obligated to do anything.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really strong take. And to a certain extent, I agree with a lot of that. I'm wondering, to zero in a little bit more, is there any utility in having a Wrights of Spring festival this year? Especially because it's completely limited in what can be accomplished. Of course, there are some Zoom readings, there's some podcasts that are coming out from this, and then your own project. And I'm wondering, as a student in the playwriting program, do you still see utility in the same way of Rites of Spring?
That's a really good question. I think, I think, I think at the beginning of this, I didn't. I think I didn't see the point of it. If I can't read people's feedback, if I can't see how people are reacting in the room, at that point in time, I was like, oh, there's no point, because I'm not getting. This isn't helpful to me. It doesn't provide any utility to me as a writer or as an artist. It's just sort of. It felt sort of masturbatory, but now I've come around on it pretty in a 180 sort of way, because I think it is educational, and the theater isn't just going to magically change in 3 months or 2 months or 1 month. It's gonna, I think, we're gonna have to see a lot more forms of online storytelling, and that if people want to sort of, who are entering the field, still be active participants in this field, then we need to sort of embrace this online storytelling platform if we want to create theater. If we want to create some other type of art, great. We don't have to subscribe to the online platform thing. If we want to write a book, great. You don't have to subscribe to the online aspect of it. But if you want to do theater, I think Rites of Spring is a really, really great sort of crash course in what to expect and what will work. Also, I mean, I don't know, when I was a first year, I really was just like itching to have somebody hear what I was writing. So that's obviously an awesome opportunity. The debutante ball is amazing. The third years have been working the entire year on their full length plays, and everybody should be watching them. The second years are pumping out their first one acts, and the fourth years, we're all kind of just doing whatever the heck whatever we want, but it's still valuable. And I think when you're paying this much money, and when for a lot of people the sort of Rites of Spring Festival is a draw, just canceling it outright, I think would have been the wrong move, and wouldn't have been done in the best interest of education or just sort of creative development.
Yeah, I totally buy that. So to go a little bit back and talk about Boxed In, can you give us a little bit of a synopsis about what this project is, so that we go in knowing what to expect? Or do you think we should observe this raw?
No, you don't have to observe it raw at all. I would say Boxed In the podcast, the multimedia podcast. Let's see. Let's try to think of like some punchy words here. Boxed In the podcast chronicles the lives of two parents, John and Louise, over 40 years, as they both initially confront and trace back all of the various artifacts and signs in and around their home on what happened to put them where they are right now in the present. And their story is underpinned by the idea that their son has recently been executed. You don't really understand why, or murdered, executed. You figure out which verbiage you prefer. And as the play sort of goes on, you want to dig deeper and understand what the sort of given circumstances are, what is the context, what got them to this point. So I would say it's tracing. Ultimately, it is something that visually and auditorily, if that's a word, arrests you and pushes you through time.
Love that synopsis.
Thank you.
Readers,
lots of arms and likes.
readers, you are going to love this play, I promise you. So I'm curious about what the inciting incident of this play was for you. Like, what made you want to tell this story?
Yeah. So sophomore year, when we were sort of figuring out our Rites of Spring ideas, I had thought about this, and then I didn't end up doing it. And I think even before then, one of my creative writing professors, her name's Kathleen Rooney, she's fantastic. She assigned us to write persona poems, and I had recently been getting really into true crime, and I had seen this photo of a mother at her son's execution hearing, and she's just racked with so much pain. And I was like, wow, I wonder what it would be like to be her, and to have to confront all of these sort of heinous things your son has done. And that sort of catapulted me to, okay, let's figure out what power parental guilt can wield in the home and wield in upbringing, and to what extent a parent's love can prevail. So those were sort of the thematic questions that were driving me forward, and I was really just curious, and again, seeing exactly how potentially heinous a child could be, and have a parent still love them. I know when I was writing this, Brett Kavanaugh hearings had been happening, and I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how any parent could love Brett Kavanaugh when all of these things are being said. And I mean, they were true. But that's another topic. And I was just like really, really interested in how hard a parent must work to love their child, or if they have to work all that hard at all, and if it's just so ingrained at that point that love and defending them is second nature. So that was the sort of conceit, and it's changed so much, but I'm really, really happy with where it ended up.
Yeah, and definitely on change. Where do you intend to go with this piece after this, or do you not know yet? Obviously, this is not necessarily the format that you intended when you set out to write this. So, do you have any intentions moving forward after this festival?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have this website up for 2 years, I think, maybe 1 year, might be 2 years. So I'm just going to keep sort of sending this to a bunch of people and seeing if anybody's interested in hiring a writer who has experience with writing for online platforms. But with the play, I think as theaters start to reopen and as we see budgets getting slashed, a two-hander is going to be particularly attractive to a lot of people. So I'm just going to work again on revising the play as much as possible and fine-tuning it and using what I learned in this podcast to inform a lot of the decisions in the rewrites, and then just send it off to as many people as possible and seeing exactly, what opportunities may or may not come.
That's so great. So we are nearing our time here together. So I'll ask one final question, and that is, if you have any advice or words of affirmation for playwrights, maybe in your position or maybe even younger, thinking about how to make art in this time, or even if they should go to the theater school, do you have any advice for those playwrights?
Yeah, I mean, I would preface by saying I don't know anything, but that I think right now is a time where we need to be really sort of forgiving to ourselves, and that if you want to write, the quality like does not matter. Like I think it's just getting into the habit of writing and finding the joy in writing is what matters right now. If that's something you are actively pursuing, if that's something you are doing right now at the theater school, if that's something you are interested in doing at the theater school, I would say it's really just make sure you can tap into the love that brought you here. Because I think as long as there's something that is exciting to you in your piece, or exciting you about a piece you want to create, you're going to create it. I think once you become unexcited about something is when it's just, there's no coming back from it. So just sort of feed the excitement. Don't worry about the quality. The quality will inevitably get better. I was a horrible writer when I came here, and I'm better now. So I would just say, yeah, don't judge yourselves too harshly. Try to find the excitement in things. It's a wild time. You don't need to be critical of yourselves.
Great advice. So Connor, when does Boxed In officially open?
Yeah, the website drops It goes live May 27th. I want to say at 5 p.m. And that's ttsboxedin.com. It'll be a hoot. Yeah, that's my spiel.
Well, great. Be sure to check out other Rights of Spring events. You could find out more information at wrightsofspring.com. Be sure to go into Playwright Central and experience all the hard work that was done there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Connor. It was such a pleasure, as always, talking to you. And happy Rights of Spring.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. Happy Rights of Spring to you too.